Mexico is heading into the USMCA renegotiation at its most vulnerable moment in years. 83% of its exports depend on a single market. Federal government revenue dropped 27.7%. Public debt stands at 56.6% of GDP. Credit rating agencies have already downgraded their outlook. And on top of that, a new executive order out of Washington is tightening controls on remittances and cross-border financial flows. In the next few minutes, we're going to break down Mexico's economic situation, the real risks it faces at the USMCA negotiating table, and what all of this means for your business, your company, or your job. Let's get into it. The economic picture, based on data published by the Mexican government in April and May of 2026, is clear. Federal government revenue fell 27.7%. Income tax dropped 4.1%. Sales tax dropped 3.7%. What prevented a larger collapse in tax collection was the fuel excise tax revenue, which grew 27.5%. And that fiscal pressure is no accident. Total public sector debt hit 20.1 trillion pesos, equivalent to 56.6% of GDP. This is a country that owes more than half of everything it produces. Now, in that same period, Banco de Mexico reported that March 2026 closed with a trade surplus of $5.9 billion. On the surface, that sounds like good news. But the same institution, in its private sector expectation survey, reveals something deeper. Governance accounts for 39% of all concerns among specialists. Money is coming in. Trust is not. And that lack of trust has very concrete reasons. 83.36% of Mexico's non-oil exports go to one single destination, the United States. That kind of concentration is not a strength anymore. It's a pressure point. And the warning signs are already showing up. Automotive exports, one of the pillars of the Mexican economy, have contracted 2.9% so far this quarter. Then there's Pemex. Mexico's state oil company is dragging a quarterly trade deficit of $6.6 billion. Crude export volume collapsed from 827,000 barrels per day down to just 495,000. That forced the country to import more. Petroleum imports grew 36.2%. And purchases of gasoline and gas shot up an alarming 140.1%. Mexico, an oil-producing country, paying more and more for its own energy. On the savings side, the National Retirement Savings System reached a historic 8.3 trillion pesos, equivalent to 23.8% of GDP. The breakdown is telling. 51.5% financing government debt, 29.8% in non-government domestic securities, 13.7% in international markets, 3.7% in other assets, and 1.3% in commodities. In plain terms, Mexican workers' retirement savings are actively funding the government, infrastructure, and the private sector. But here's the alarm no one is talking about loudly enough. Partial withdrawals for unemployment grew 26.5% in 2025, pulling more than 38.8 billion pesos out of the system. Workers are not withdrawing their savings because they want to. They're withdrawing because they have to. On credit ratings, Moody's downgraded Mexico's sovereign credit rating from BA2 to BA3, cut the growth forecast to under 1% for this year, and called out Pemex directly as a recurring risk to state finances. S&P shifted Mexico's outlook from stable to negative, warning that slow growth and spending rigidity will severely limit fiscal flexibility, dragging Pemex and CFE down with it. And while all of this is happening inside Mexico, Washington is adding another layer of pressure. Trump's executive order, restoring integrity to America's financial system, mandates strict bank reviews on accounts, loans, and transfers linked to individuals without work authorization. The direct hit lands on remittances, cross-border payments, and the operations of many Mexican companies doing business with the U.S. Now, with that economic backdrop on the table, let's talk about the specific risks Mexico faces at the USMCA renegotiation. The first is Chapter 22, which covers state-owned enterprises and designated monopolies. Article 22.4 requires that state enterprises operate under commercial criteria. Article 22.6 prohibits government subsidies from damaging the interests of investors from the other member countries. The problem is right there in plain sight. The massive fiscal transfers and tax exemptions Mexico has handed to Pemex and CFE are exactly the kind of preferential treatment this chapter was written to challenge. The second is Chapter 28, on good regulatory practices. It demands transparency, public consultation, and institutional predictability. Mexico's 2024 judicial reform is the most cited example internationally, and not by accident. Moody specifically referenced it in its May 2026 analysis as a factor weakening the credibility of Mexican economic policy. This is not just political criticism. It's a signal that Mexico is drifting away from the very standards the treaty requires it to meet. Then there's Article 32.2 of the USMCA, which allows to take measures affecting trade and financial flows whenever it determines there's a threat to its essential security, and that does not constitute a treaty violation. Meanwhile, Trump's executive order is already directing banks to apply strict scrutiny to accounts, loans, and transfers, explicitly citing illicit activity traced to Mexico. The most direct impact for millions of Mexican families, remittances. So now we have a clear picture. The real question is, what does this mean for you, your business, or your job? In every period of economic uncertainty, there are always two types of players. Those who wait to see what happens and end up reacting when it's already too late. And those who anticipate, reorganize, and come out stronger than their competition. The difference between the two is not luck. It's preparation. The businesses that will thrive in this new environment are the ones that achieve greater operational efficiency, higher quality in their value proposition, and smarter decision-making. The ones that turn their data into decisions. The ones that optimize their supply chain before costs force them to. The ones that build solid, capable teams aligned to the company's goals. So if you want to strengthen your business in this new environment, visit Carlos Bastida's website, where you'll find his full portfolio of services, including business intelligence. What does it do? It stops the guesswork. It translates your business data into a clear map that tells you how to cut costs, manage your resources, spot risks and opportunities, and make the decisions that actually move your business forward. Supply chain design. What does it do? It finds the optimal flow for your products, reducing costs, eliminating bottlenecks, and increasing your competitiveness and profitability. Soft skills training. What does it do? It makes your people deliver results. Building high-performance teams, effective communication, and a culture built around efficiency and hitting your objectives. The link to the site is in the description. One click could be the first step toward a stronger, more efficient, more prepared business. Thanks for staying until the end. If this breakdown was useful to you, share it with someone who needs it. See you in the next one.